ค่ะ Good evening, Central Community. Welcome to a special board meeting of the Central Unified School Board for January 19th, 2022. I'm calling the meeting to order at 6:09. Attendance, all board members are attending. I'll take a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Carrillo, a second by Mr. Cervantes. Discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Chan.
Sure. I guess we'll go ahead and start with the flag salute. Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chan. Moving on to item E, comments from the public. Do we have any phone calls pending?
Would you like me to put 30 seconds on the clock, President Ellis? All right, 30 seconds have passed and we have no comments by phone at this time.
All righty, thank you very much. Moving on to item F, information item, discussion on superintendent search. Board members, at this point, unless you had any questions for Mrs. Davis, I was going to excuse her from the rest of the meeting unless you would like her to participate, since this is being publicly broadcast. What is the consensus of the board?
I have no objection if she wants to participate or whatever the majority of the board decides.
I have no objection if she leaves or stays.
I'm fine.
Fine if she stays.
Either way for me too.
Mr. Chan? Well, hearing no objections, Ms. Davis, you're welcome to stay. The vendors are online. Who are they?
It is Mr. Hewitt
Mr. Hewitt,
and Dr. Monroe.
you may start your presentation.
Good, thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you for working with McPherson and Jacobson. Myself and Stanley Monroe are just very pleased to be helping you with your search. We have already talked with 3 of you in your subcommittee. And tonight, what we want to do is to briefly talk about the process, the calendar, the stakeholders that we wish to engage, that you wish us to engage. And then probably most importantly, the criteria that you want to set for the selection of your next superintendent. I want to mention just briefly, my background is that I've done this now for 9 years with McPherson and Jacobson when they first came to California, and this would be my 27th search. We have one other consultant who's not here tonight because her husband's undergoing surgery in Sacramento. That's Marilyn Shepard, and she's traveling up to Sacramento with him at this time. but she'll be helping us with the search as we go along. My background, and probably most of you know, and I'll be very quick. I was a superintendent for 16 years in Dixon, California, Lodi for about half of that time, and in Berkeley. And then I've been an interim superintendent. I've done 3 stints of being an interim superintendent during my retirement, my supposed retirement. I was a high school math and physics teacher in Elk Grove Unified School District, as well as a principal there for 10 years, amongst other positions, assistant superintendent for all the secondary programs. Stanley, do you want to introduce yourself very briefly, and then we'll get on with the process?
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. And once again, it's a pleasure to meet you all. And thank you for this opportunity. So as I said, my name is Stanley Monroe. I've been in education for over about 15 years, and I've been in both elementary, middle, and I started in high school. And long story short, they wanted leaders to be in elementary and middle. They were really short there. So I spent a lot of time in the elementary K-8. I've been a math coach. Math and physics is my background, just like Dr. Hewitt. And I've also been an executive director as well as a superintendent. And I've been with McPherson and Jacobson for just about 1 year.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Stanley. And I'm a Mr. Hewitt. I do not have my doctorate. Okay, so let's, unless you have any questions, let's jump right into it if you're ready. And this is all for public consumption, so none of this needs to be in closed session. We want to start with the calendar, and if we can put the calendar up on the screen, I think that'd be helpful for everybody. And we'll go through the calendar, and that also will explain the process from start to finish. There we go. Okay. All right, so this is the first board meeting. If you can move it up a little bit, that would be helpful. And tonight we set the calendar. We go ahead and identify who it is that you want us to talk to as your stakeholders for input. We'll go ahead and identify the selection criteria. We'll depend on Anita to give us your contact information. Really, it's not contact information. It's just really, your names and positions on the board. We believe that Anita Lopez is our point of contact. We've been working with her for the last few weeks, and she's been delightful. So we hope that the board can allow us to go ahead. That's rather typical, is to work out of the superintendent's office on this. And we'll discuss advertising. Now, I wanted to say a couple of introductory words. This schedule, which I sent out last week to you, is what I would call a regular interview schedule. Typically, or a regular selection calendar, if you will. Typically, our process takes about 4 months, and that's exactly what this does from start to finish. It can be faster or it can be slower. And I would recommend, frankly, you use this particular calendar because in terms of time, you don't really need to be faster. You started early enough to be right in the thick of the spring selection processes. So most all districts will be interviewing in late April and in early May. Some do go earlier and some go much later too. But I think that you don't need to sacrifice time for your schedule. However, if you feel like you want to go faster, we certainly can adjust this and move much quicker. But there will be a few sacrifices. And the biggest one, of course, would be how long it is out there for people to respond to and for us to recruit candidates. And then also how long we would have for the vetting of candidates. So as we go through that, be mindful of this, and we can talk overall about whether this calendar works for you. And then also specifically, do these dates work? We can always adjust the dates somewhat as we go along. That's not unusual. We oftentimes adjust the interview dates because things come up, and some board members may not be able to be present on a certain date. And we want you all present for this very important task that you have. So given that, I'm going to go ahead and take you through the calendar and entertain any questions that you have. I'm going to start with the position advertisement. We would like to advertise right away. In order to advertise, really all we need to do is have the closing date. We like also to have the criteria, but if it comes along a little bit later, that's fine. So we think that we should advertise 4 times in EdCal print. EdCal is the newspaper that goes out to all almost all administrators that belong to AXA. And it is the main source where people look for superintendent openings, along with EdJoin. And EdJoin, you belong to EdJoin, that there is really no cost typically for a school district to put any position in EdJoin. You probably post all of your openings in EdJoin. We recommend you do that as well. We also recommend 30 days online posting for EdCal during the coming months, and 4 postings. That is a cost of about $1,000, and I think that is figured in under your cap price, if I'm not mistaken. The other source of advertising is with McPherson and Jacobs' website. We get about 80,000 hits on that a month. We are a national firm. All of us here in California are California administrators. And sometimes we will get some good candidates from outside the state who are interested. But quite frankly, the main drawing pool for superintendents are California administrators. I have done 27 searches, and I've placed 1 person from out of state in those 27, and that person had left the state to go become a superintendent in Alaska and wanted to come back. So really, most of his career was in California. The next thing that we will do, and this will consume most of next month, is to go ahead and interview your stakeholders to get input from them about what they're looking for in a superintendent. And we ask 4 questions of everyone. We ask, what are the strengths or the good things about your community? What are the good things that you would say about your school district? We use those to recruit. We use that information to recruit. The third question is, what are the issues that needs that the next superintendent should be able to address? We use that to look and see for a good match. We want to find the right person for your school district. So we need to know, the board needs to know, what are those main issues out there? What are the main things that this superintendent's going to have to tackle, at least in the short term? And then the final question is the traditional one, of what are the skills, attributes, and characteristics that you'd like to see in a superintendent? We typically come into a district for 3 or 4 days and go ahead and interview groups of administrators, classified staff, certificated staff, teachers, students, typically high school students, and then parent groups and community groups. Those are the groups that we typically will interview, and we'll do whatever you direct us to do, and whatever you think is a good thing to do, and however you wish to do. We'll talk about that later tonight after we get through the calendar. So we'll go back tonight and talk more about stakeholder input, because that's actually the next phase down the line. And so we'll need some input from you. We can do that in person, and we can do it online. And we have found advantages with both, frankly. And there's nothing better than in person for forming a relationship and making sure that people know that we take interest and are listening to them. But we've also found with parents that online gets better participation. We have more parents that in all of our searches that have been able to get on online. However, having said that, we've also noticed that it does appeal to more tech savvy and more affluent parents. So we do like to do some in-person work with our parents and community groups and groups. Some searches, I'm doing one other search, helping with one other search in Davis. They want to do everything by Zoom because of their sensitivity to COVID. I'm fully vaccinated, and I think Stanley is too. We, with certain safety standards, do not mind doing some in-person interviewing with groups, but we'll certainly ask you. In addition to this, we have a survey that anybody can take, and we will get that survey to you. It's the same 4 questions. People respond in writing. All of this comes back to you in a report in our next meeting on March 8th. And we are recommending that we meet with you on March 8th. That is your regular scheduled board meeting. And during that meeting, it's a shorter meeting. We certainly can have a special one if you wish, but we have found that most boards can get the work done that needs to happen in their regular meeting if scheduled appropriately, and it saves you an extra night out. We will review the information from the stakeholder report. We'll give you a summary of it, and we'll go through that, but you get the whole report that evening. We'll talk to you about interview procedures. We'll mention those a bit tonight as we go through the schedule. We will discuss compensation package. That's usually in closed session. And we'll also identify stakeholders that you may want to have engaged in the interview process, should you choose to go that route, which we recommend. We have set a closing date of April 5th. That's about 2 months after it gets out there. Not everything will get posted out here by the end of January, just based on different timelines and deadlines that the different magazines and editors have. So that will give us a full 2 months of having the job open and for us to recruit. And that's what I typically recommend, is that you have the job open for 2 months. I've done some searches where they've wanted to do just 30 days. And that's kind of quick for this important position, but that's up to you. The third board meeting is a special meeting, and it's the meeting where we come back from you with to review the candidates. Most of this meeting is in closed session. So that evening we'll probably, you'll have a 2 or 3 hour closed session. The way that we do this is that we review all of the candidates with you. Typically, we've been having anywhere from 30 to 50 candidates apply. We will have vetted all the candidates by that time, and we will have a recommended short list of candidates that we think you should consider. But we will go through every candidate with you. And if you wish to go into any of those candidates in depth that we have not recommended, we'll do that as well, either that day or that evening, depending on whether you want to do it as an individual or as a board. That evening, we would recommend that you let us tell the candidates that we would like them to do a 3-question short interview, and we'll give those interviews for you to see. So we'll review those interviews with you. So you not only hear what we know about the candidate, you actually get to see the candidate beforehand. And then we'll go ahead and talk about each of the candidates and have you decide who you want to interview. We recommend, given our interview process, that you interview no more than 6 candidates over the space of 2 days, 3 candidates a day. Some districts occasionally have wanted to do more, and if you do, then we suggest that we have a sort of a pre-interview schedule, and then come back and do a smaller group of candidates. But 6 seems to work out quite well for boards. That evening, we'll also review the interview questions. We will go ahead and finalize them that night. We will appoint, if you should choose to have a stakeholder panel help you in the interview process, you will appoint that panel that night. And then we'll also finalize what the interview schedule is going to be. Can we move up the schedule here? Yeah, there we go. Okay, we have 2 different weekends set up for the interviews. We can interview right after this board meeting, just a couple days later. We oftentimes do that, and I think it's helpful for boards to have this compressed into a single week of attention. Or we can, do it later. It's certainly not too late to do it later in May, on May 6th and 7th. I've picked a Friday and a Saturday simply through experience that boards, most board members don't want to miss 2 full days of work. And so many boards have had us go on a Friday where you miss a day of work and a Saturday when it's kind of your own time. But that varies from board to board, and you all may or may not, these dates may or may not work for you. As I would also say is we should set these dates tonight. However, it's not unusual for them to change down the road based on things that may just happen in our lives in the next 4 months. This then would allow you to make a formal selection with the approval of a contract at either your May 10 or May 24 board meeting. And then the starting date we would recommend would be July 1. And this allows for some crossover time for the superintendent to become acclimatized to the school district before they start in on the job. Okay. I want to open it up to you and any discussion that you want to have about this schedule and any questions that you might have for myself or Stanley.
Mr. Cervantes?
Thank you, Board Chair. I just had a question, 2 questions in regards to time frame. You talked about 30 and you talked about 60. Would 90 behoove us? Can you talk about pros and cons if we were to extend it to 90 days
Sure.
as opposed to 60? And then
Yeah.
I have a part 2 to this question.
Yeah. So some districts like to keep it open a much longer period of time. And I think that the advantage of that is that the word gets around just that much more and it's out there, a longer period of time. However, I don't think it really attracts more candidates. It is out there longer period of time, gives us a longer period of time to recruit people and to bring people on board. The thing that I worry about the most on that is that the further you go past the end of April, the beginning of May, many candidates may get scooped up by other school districts. You're right in the thick of it right now. If you do interviews at the end of April, beginning of May, that's when pretty much most of the other districts are doing it. They usually start the thick of the interviews for districts that are having a July 1 start, which is most of them, is April and May. So you're right in the middle of it at this point. If you were to add another 30 days of keeping it open, that would put you to the end of May, the beginning of June. And, I don't know that would be awful, but I don't think it would be as good as what this schedule allows for.
My thought there is potentially candidates may want to finish their school year without any disruption. And maybe we could draw a few more candidates in the event that it's a little bit later. And again, I appreciate your pros and your cons, but that was kind of my concern there. And then my second question was, your recommendation was to interview 6, potentially 6. Of course, it's just a recommendation.
Right.
We elected and decided we wanted to potentially interview 10.
10, right? Yeah, and I've done that, and
Right.
and it's totally up to the board how they deal with that. Well, let's talk a little bit about the interviews, and then it might become a little more clear. We have a very thorough interview process. It's a whole day. It's a full day for you and the candidates. So it is not a traditional come on in and have a hour and a half interview. That's part of it. But what we recommend is that you get to see and know the candidates through not only your eyes, but your stakeholders' eyes. So we recommend that you get a panel of stakeholders together that under a confidential contract that they sign, that they too interview the candidates and they give you the strengths and the concerns of each candidate. And then during this time, it's kind of a round robin organization that we do. You also get to sit down one-on-one or with a 7-member board, be 2 or 3 on 1, and have either lunch, coffee, or breakfast for an hour with each candidate and get to know them as a person and get to know them socially. This is called the social component, very common in the business world. And our founder, Tom Jacobson, is a professor of HR at Nebraska. University of Nebraska, and he really pulled this out as something that was prevalent in industry. That the chief executive, it's more than can they answer the questions right. You really want to know the person and you want to know their personality and see if it meshes. So that's the reason why when we do the regular interview process, we only say do 2 or 3 candidates a day. Now, if you find that there are more than 6 that you're interested in, we have some options. We could do a preliminary interview, kind of a traditional short interview of everybody and then call 6 back. Or I have had a case where we've done 3 a day for 3 days and we've done 9. So we really design this how you wish us to do it. We work for you. So I just like to lay out what typically happens and what we kind of anticipate happening. But as we go along, if you have a really great slate of candidates, and I have had this happen one time where you have a lot and you really want to see all of them, then that's what we'll do. And we'll either have a preliminary interview with them or we'll go ahead and we'll extend past 2 days.
I appreciate your insight. And again, I kind of feel like if we had more candidates, then we might have the opportunity to do a second round of interviews.
Right.
So we might do a filter through the first 9 or 10, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I'm just hypothetically speaking a number.
When I had this happen once before, and I think we did have 9, that's what we did. We had a first round interview, kind of traditional, and then we did the full in-depth thing. And actually, it was really interesting. We went from 9 to 4 in that first round interview, and they could have had 6. The only thing I said is don't go. Let's try to keep it there. Let's at least go down to 6, and they went down to 4 after that. So either way, we can do that either way. We just have to account for it, and that's why I say we have to stay a little bit flexible with these interview dates. These are 2 weekends that I think would be good weekends for us to work on, Friday, Saturday. I'm kind of curious from the board, does that Friday, Saturday thing work for you all? Some boards want to do it all during the week and some boards want to do it only during the weekend, but I find that this Friday, Saturday, works pretty well for boards. I have had some boards say they want to go Saturday, Monday, So in general, does that seem to be, one work day, one not work day in tradition? How's that seem for you guys?
I
Mr.
like that.
Hewitt, why don't we move on? I see Ms. Carrillo has her hand up and she has a
Sure.
few questions, okay?
Okay.
I have one question regarding the timeline as it relates to advertising the position. You mentioned having the criteria. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by criteria? Are we talking about a job description, a summary of the qualifications we're looking at, and then what relationship or how is the information that's obtained from our stakeholders going to be used? Is that part of the interview process, or do we incorporate that at all in
Great
either
question.
the job description or
Great.
a summary of the job posting?
Yeah, great questions. And we chatted about this a little bit in the interview with your subcommittee. So let's delve into it a little bit tonight. So first of all, the criteria that we use, and I think I gave you examples, right? Wasn't I able to send out about
You did.
a dozen examples? Yeah. We, instead of traditionally what search firms do is they take boilerplate statements and you select from a list what you want on that. And we don't do that. We ask that you focus in on 5, maybe 6 if you need to, areas. And then we write descriptors on those. And the reason that we do that in our criteria is that through experience, that gives both the candidates and us a more focused characteristic criteria expectation for the superintendent. It's an important thing that we craft for you from what you give us, and you're going to start tonight doing that, because we use that when we go ahead and recruit. We use that when we go ahead and select who we're going to interview. We actually use that then when we also make the final selections. When we take you through a process about who it is you want, we go back to the criteria and say, okay, given these 6 areas or 5 areas, how do they match up? Which ones? Maybe you want an instructional leader as one of those criteria areas, and then we talk about that. So that's the importance of you determining the criteria. Now, the question about you get stakeholder, and we do that right at the beginning because it is your job to tell us up front what it is you're looking for. However, it's not static. and it can be modified and changed, and oftentimes is in the second, even the third meeting. Because when the stakeholders give their input, they will pretty much confirm most of what you see, but something else may come up. And so I will ask you at the second meeting, is there anything in here that you think we should add or change in our criteria? Sometimes there is, and that's part of the process. The other thing about the stakeholder input in this report that we give you, we also give this to the candidates who are going to be interviewed. It's a public document, if you will, and I encourage the board during the interview process to ask the candidates what they learned about the district and what they learned from the stakeholder input into this process, and that's very revealing. And sometimes a specific question comes from what the stakeholders said, either it's about an issue or about characteristics. So it's very helpful for you to digest that stakeholder input and to use it in the interview process. That helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great question.
Any other questions from the board? A question was asked about the interview process, the weekend interview process. Is there any statement by the board, any concerns that they would not like that, or?
I like that process. One day, or one weekend.
Yep, and we'll talk more about it as we get down the road. But let's have you on your calendars. Start to block out those 4 days, and then we got two options about where we go on it. And we really want the question comes up, can I do one day and not both? You have to be there for the whole thing. Okay. Part of our job is to protect you as well from any kind of personnel suits and anything. And everybody that participates from the board in the selection of the superintendent has to be there for all of the interviews. If there's something else that you have to miss, that's fine. That's not a problem. But when we're in the interview process and the selection process, we want to make it work for all 7.
Board members, are you fine with the 2-day interviews with the understanding that we need to have the board there, or do you want to move it to 1 day and we'll see as many as we can see in that 1 day? Mr. Savant?
I'd like the
Ladies first.
Ms. Carrillo?
I like the idea of doing a Friday and a Saturday. And depending on the number of candidates, should we decide to interview, assuming we get at a minimum 6 qualified candidates, that allows us, and we don't feel rushed, because I don't want that to happen either. And I think we as a board should commit to being present during both of those days. So if we anticipate any conflicts, I think we should notify our board president as soon as we can.
I want to mention one other thing that just came to my mind, but I would be mentioning to you at the next meeting. We typically deliberate after the second day, typically. So that day is usually longer. Some boards want to not deliberate right after their interviews. They want to come back another day to deliberate. So I always put that option out there for the board. And I don't think we need to make that decision tonight. The real important thing is to get those interview dates on your schedule. And then we can talk more about once you become a little more familiar with the process, and I talk to you again about it at the next meeting. Then we can talk again about, will we deliberate? Will we be, have enough energy and enough focus to deliberate? In fact, you can decide that right up to the very end that you want to come back another day and deliberate. But that also is something with the interview process, is the board has to make a decision. And sometimes that takes an hour. And frankly, sometimes it can take quite a long time. So I would like to lobby you on the deliberation part to just stay flexible with it, but to also look at your calendars and see, how are you after these 2 days, either place. I mean, if you're going to be going on a 10-day vacation on May 8th, we probably ought to know that, you know. I've had several boards that have come back and deliberated and said, let's get back together in 2 days. We need to sleep on it, you know. And it was healthy. It was a good thing to do, you know. And oftentimes they've come down to, you know, 2 candidates that they're both great and they can't decide easily. So is that clear? Is that helpful? I hope so.
Mr. Cervantes, did you have a question?
No question. I just wanted to throw something else out there. I'm going to be very optimistic and hope that we have more than 6 qualified candidates. But in the event, I just want to say my disposition in the event that we had to go a Friday, Saturday, and then perhaps the following Saturday, I would be open to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, as of right now, I'm hearing a consensus within the board that the Friday and Saturday for interview works for everyone. So
Great.
That's the consensus. So we'll proceed with that.
Excellent. Very good. Yep. And that's as far as we should go tonight with this calendar. Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. We will move this calendar forward, and our home office will start the advertising process. Now, let's go back to the top where we have advertising. Okay, right there. Okay. Is it acceptable to you to use these 3, actually 4 methods of advertising the position? Word gets out very well in California with EdCal and EdJoin. All of our candidates go there to look for jobs. And then the M&J website gets a lot of hits. There are really 3 major national firms. And you know, we all get a lot of hits on national candidates. I'm most concerned about California postings. With EdCal, I would go ahead and post it.
I'd like to see everybody's screen on here.
Everybody see it? Yeah. I would post it January 31st. You'd see it in EdCal January 31st, February 14th, March 7th, and then probably March, either March 14th or 21st. I have to find out about that one. So it'd be posted every in 2-week intervals during that time, consistently through. And that's you know, I've done this many times, and that'll be the best way to make sure that it's seen. We could do 60 days online. I have found that if you do it in the first 30 days online, pretty much the people that look online are pretty attentive. So I don't know. It's not very expensive if you wanted to do 2 months online. I believe that in our proposal, this is all within your cap figure that you were talking about, that you were given. Everybody okay with that?
It's from the board.
Yep.
There's 2 hands up.
I just want to get the go ahead to advertise.
I don't see the other hands. Hold on. Let me see.
Trustee Steen
Carrillo
has his
and
hand,
Mr.
and so do I.
Okay. Ms. Creel, go ahead.
I mean, as far as the question with respect to advertising and the recommended advertising, other than the recommendation from you guys as our agents, I would ask our assistant superintendent, Mr. Kalesian, to provide whether he has any input, if there's any other resource that he would recommend, having done
Sure.
this type of search and having done our searches. I personally don't have experience in posting, so I would look to our experts.
The other options that we have used are either national, or they are with certain administrative groups that are with underrepresented minority groups of administrators. So CASA is one of them that I think still does some advertising, but it's not very prevalent that school districts do that. And all candidates of different ethnic backgrounds see it in EdJoin and see it in EdCal. So, and they are fairly expensive to go in other journals. For instance, we have advertised before in Ed Week, which is a national newspaper that comes out, I think, every week, Education Week. But to advertise in that, it's $600 an issue. It used to be 600 an issue. It's probably $1,000 an issue right now. And we really don't think you get a better national bang for your buck than you do with the free website for McPherson and Jacobson. So you can do more advertising, and it'd be great. Talk to your HR department, see if they have some other suggestions.
Mr. Chan?
I appreciate Dr. Hewitt your comment about advertising, especially in certain underrepresented groups. But I did want to at least bring to the board and just kind of make sure that we maybe I'm sure they have a newsletter, like an email newsletter, and sometimes I just think it's a good faith sort of attempt to make sure we reach. I believe they have like either a Hispanic or a Latinx particular like superintendent, assistant superintendent organization, or a Black sort of superintendent assistant, at least to the major organizations that may exist. Whether they charge or not, I assume it may be nominal in terms of whatever their even internal newsletter, email newsletter service. But I think for us to make a good faith attempt to reach out to groups that, whether they see it on EdJoin or not, but at least to make a good faith attempt specifically to say we want you to consider. I think that's definitely a positive.
We certainly can do that. They do not have a casual way of doing it. They have it in their regular publications, and they do charge for it. I can get more information on that if you wish. We have a period of time here, I could even come back at the before the next meeting and say, here are the options if you wish to do more advertising. You want me to do that for both African American and Latino administrator groups?
Yeah, ALAS, Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents.
Right.
ALAS is one of them.
Yeah.
And we can get you the others. There'll be no problem with, again, we'll do what it is that you want and where you want us to post the posting. So that will be no problem at all.
I mean, if it's the wishes of the rest of the board, that would definitely be my suggestion, to make good faith effort to at least attempt to reach out to the professional organizations by Latino-led groups, Black-led groups, maybe Asian American, maybe Pacific Islander, whatever the case may be.
And we'll give you the information and the costs, and then you can let us know maybe as soon as next week if you wish.
Mr. Failing, did you have a question? I saw your hand moving. No? All righty. Any other questions?
I have a comment. I mean, to Trustee Singh's point, I don't think that it's a waste of money, and I think that it would be in our best interest, and at least for me as a trustee, considering the population of students and our district, we need to at least make an effort to advertise to those groups as well, in addition to our standard modes of advertisement. But if President Solis doesn't object, if our assistant superintendent Collegian has a response, I see you now, has a response to my question, whether there are any other advertising avenues that he would recommend, I would like to hear.
Trustee Carrillo, thank you. Yeah, I was ready to respond when you asked the first time. I just was waiting for the opportunity to participate in the discussion. I know it's not listed there, but I'm sure the firm has plans for it. But having a robust, social media posting regarding the position outside of just adding the link from EdJoin on all of those outfits would be my hard recommendation. That social media moves quickly, and the advertisement of it does provide immediate access to people who might be able to recommend somebody for the position or reach somebody who might be thinking about it. And I don't.
Yeah, I'm sorry I didn't mention that. That is automatic on M&J. And so we have social media for all of the positions on Twitter, Facebook. I mean, I think there's like 4 different platforms now that we access.
Yeah, I think adding LinkedIn
addition.
on there would be
Yeah.
another good one. So yeah, I'm glad to
Yeah.
hear that. I figured it was embedded in,
Yeah, it is. It's embedded with the M&J advertisement. So, but I'll double check on that.
But other than that, the trustees, the standard areas where we've seen those positions posted, EdCal is the prominent one. I had this last edition I was just reviewing a few days ago, and there's probably 10 or more superintendencies posted on there currently, as we are in the hiring season for that position and other executive administrative positions as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, what I'm hearing is a consensus of the board is that they want to extend where we're going to advertise. So we give a direction to the vendor to bring back a list of possible places to advertise, as well as a cost for that.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get that. We'll get back to you on that. Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Cervantes, did you have a question?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right.
Okay. All right. Okay. So next month, we're going to be interviewing your stakeholders. And I have talked with Aida about the work of the district. This is a joint partnership between the superintendent's office and us. We typically set up groups, as I mentioned before, of administrators. For instance, we will have one group of site principals and another group of district office administrators, and ask them those standard 4 questions about what's good for what are some good things about your community, what are some good things about your school district, what are the issues that we should be taking a look at for to help us get the right fit, and then what are the skills, attributes, and characteristics that you would like to see in the next superintendent. We will typically meet with classified staff at least at 2 different times, because classified's work schedules are varied, so it's kind of common maybe to have a early afternoon meeting and a later evening meeting. Some districts excuse classified staff from their duties to go attend those. Some ask them to do it outside their regular work time. We will interview teachers in a district your size. We would recommend that we have an elementary teacher group, that we have a middle school teacher group, and we have a high school teacher group, and invite them to come to a probably a larger meeting, whoever is interested in that. We also will want to have a special meeting with union leaders. Some districts like us to have classified and teachers together in one meeting. I kind of like that, and the unions do, but some like it separate. Where it gets a little different is how do we interview parents? Most districts will have us have some open forums for parents, and at least 2 in sometimes different parts of the district. Your district is a fairly good size, and so we may choose to go out to your feeder either middle schools or high schools, and have some parent forums at different times, and to advertise those. And with students, we typically will meet with high school students. You have 3 high schools, 1 developing, and so we oftentimes will go out to those schools and to interview selected students, however you wish to have us talk with students. Oftentimes it's student leaders. Sometimes it's the unnamed student leaders too that a school might select. In terms of the community, we like to leave that open to your suggestion, but typically what we've done is we have had community leaders of either school support groups like booster groups, or service clubs, or special needs groups that have donated services time or resources to a school district or supported it in some way. And in addition to that, then we also oftentimes will meet with city leaders, whether they're appointed or elected. Sometimes that's in one meeting, sometimes it's in two. So I wanted to have you have a discussion about how you see who you really would like us to engage with. And oftentimes after this discussion, the president of the board also will work with the point of contact, Anita, to clarify and to put this together. I want to mention that it's quite usual for us to say, oh, gosh, we should have interviewed that person or that group, and we forgot about them at the front end. No problem. We have a full month. So if something comes up where we didn't interview a group, please call me or call Anita, and we'll get it, and we'll get there, and we'll get it done. Our goal is to get all of the input that we can. We do take their input to these questions, and we do publish it by group. And so you'll get to see what each group had to say about those 4 questions. Stanley, is there anything that you'd like to add on? Stanley and Marilyn and myself will, of course, all be working on this, and we'll all split the duties in doing this. But Stanley's right there, and Marilyn is Shepherd is very close too. So they have probably more insight than I would into how to make sure we cover all bases on this. And we're very proud. We're very proud of the work we do in this area. So. Stanley, anything you have? Yeah.
Yeah, just to add, as you know, the stakeholder piece is critical. And it really gives you, the board, and us a lot of cover in that we're really reaching out, we're seeking their opinion. And what, I would like to know is how best to go about making that connection with our stakeholders. How would you like for us to go about that process? So we'd like to hear from you, and whether it's now or you want to email us, who do we speak to, but how do you want us to contact them? How do you want us to go about that process, whether it's teachers, administrators, classified parents? How would you like us to go about that?
Yeah. One thing, Stanley, you remind me of, it's not only I've been kind of focusing on the who, but the how is important too. We oftentimes before COVID, all the time before COVID, we did them face to face. Now with COVID, we do a lot of these by Zoom, and there's advantages and disadvantages. One of the big advantages with parents is we get much bigger participation with parents. Now, having said that, I always worry about, so I hope that I don't miss people because they don't have a computer or aren't tech savvy. And so maybe it's one dimension of how we get parent participation in this process. But some of these could be by Zoom. Many of them can be in person as well.
I'd like to go ahead, and you did mention that you'd be contacting or bargaining groups. It might be a good idea, whether you want to do that in person or by Zoom, to have a meeting with the bargaining group and their executive officers. That's right. One. I would suggest you do it by individual bargaining group.
Okay, by individual group.
Also, you mentioned something about you have a questionnaire that you were going to submit to the public about what they'd like to see in our next superintendent. Could you please email that to all the board members? That way the board members could also fill it out and return it to you online. That way they can fill it out at their convenience.
Well, let me just interject. I'm glad you mentioned that. Now, before that even goes out, the board would look at it and see, okay, is this what you want to go out? Is this how you want it phrased? Is this how you want it to look?
Yeah, we review the 4 questions with you, and that goes out to our stakeholders and the board. If you have any, it's the 4 questions that I talked to. It's the same survey that we do for everybody.
Okay.
But if you have something you want to change in that, if you have something that you want to add to it, sometimes the board will say, gee, well, let's consider this question. And so I will go ahead and send those to you in my communication here probably this weekend about what the 4 questions are, and ask if you have any feedback about other things that you want us to look at or ask. But do remember, we have limited time with each group. It's not, we want to give everybody lots of time to respond to questions. So we have to make sure we don't ask, a dozen questions of folks.
All righty. Ms. Carrillo, you have a question?
I do, since we're on the subject of survey. So both for the questionnaire, is that provided and translated to languages other than English?
It is.
So we have a large population, a majority population of Punjabi, Hmong, and Spanish speaking, and we typically translate a lot of our communications. So that's my first question. The second question is whether any in-person or Zoom meetings where you will ensure that there are interpreters available so that we can facilitate comments from these marginalized communities and non-English speaking communities as well.
Right. So we work with the district on interpreters in our parent meetings, whether it be by Zoom or in person. We do have a consultant that will work with us if you want to have it all in Spanish. That's the only language that we have fluency in within our consultants. So we'll, yes, we will. And we do, the survey does come in several languages. We'll use your major languages, whatever you send out to parents in the languages. You say you have 3 that you typically translate in, or 2 others?
That has been my experience, but I misspoke. There's also a 4th that I know we have a large population. So it's Arabic, Spanish, Hmong, and Punjabi. I'm sure we have other, speaking statistically, smaller populations that speak other languages. But
we translated with the same standard that you do. Any communication that you translate into the languages you do translate, we will do the same.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Okay. All right. Did that sound like a pretty good rundown of getting information from your stakeholders and the kind of the methodologies? Are there any community groups that you really think that we need to access that are unique that we should know about?
President Solis, if I may.
Yes, Mr. Carrillo.
Thank you. Well, I think it's going to be important to identify, first, I would like to see invitations to our junior high students. I think they have the knowledge and ability and are significantly developed to contribute in this process. And then as far as our community meetings, I know we have specific groups that include members of our marginalized community, but I also know that we have specific staff in our district. I can think, and I know this is public, so if you're listening, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, but Ms. Nora Ceballos, who works with a large group of our marginalized community, and I think it would be in our best interest to ensure that we're reaching out to them who may not have access to technology, in addition to some of our more involved parents who will be able to reach out via Zoom or some other technological means.
One of the groups that we always access is DLAC, ELAC, and we typically will have your staff help us with that. And there is typically an organized group of parents from different underrepresented groups that whether it be language or socioeconomic challenges that we engage with. So we'll definitely use that structure that you already have inside your district. Okay, any other groups or any other this is very helpful. Any other access? We certainly can do junior high students as well. Yeah. They're a lot of fun. I've done them a couple of times. I've had a couple of districts that wanted that as well, and they wanted to see what junior high students. And you know, there's always something that students say that nobody else says, and it's just a thrill to be able to report that to the board. Students said this is something they're looking for in a superintendent, and you know, the student voice is important. Okay, well, if you think of anything, get it to either myself or Aida. By the way, my contact, Aida has my contact information. You can call or email me at any time that you wish. And in my communication to you, I'll include that as well in the next email that you get from me. Okay. Okay.
And I wanted to make sure with the board that everyone's in consensus with the timeline submitted. If there's any concerns, please speak up now that you have a problem with the timeline.
Right.
Mr. Cervantes.
Thank you, Board Chair. Don't necessarily have a problem, but I do, and I understood Mr. Hewitt to say that we could pivot if we needed to at any given time.
That's
So
right.
don't
That's exactly right.
yeah. So that leaves the door of opportunity always
Yes.
open. So I appreciate that.
Yep, absolutely. And it will happen. I mean, I hope it does, because that's just a good sign that everybody's on board and working to make sure we can get as much input as we can. And if we miss anybody, to make sure we get it. And even if we go down, you know, past the March meeting, I've said, oh gosh, you know, these parents said, why didn't you ask us? And so I'll come right in there and interview them and say, hey, you know, look, even though it didn't get in the report, I'll do an addendum to the report and make sure it's part of it. So we take this part of working with your stakeholders very seriously, and you know, we're not going to put any restrictions or barriers on it to make sure. The important thing is to hear the voices, hear all of the voices that wish to participate.
Mr. Collegian, do you have any concerns with what you've heard so far pertaining to the process or the timeline?
I have no concerns. I think it's a good timeline. I do concur though with the presenter's earlier comment about, in the event that the window was extended from 60 to 90, that the hiring window can be a very vigorous one, and losing out on candidates could potentially be, I want to use the word concern, but capturing that window in that 60-day period, I think would suffice. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, it doesn't mean that the longer you open it up, that you're going to get the candidate. I mean, just to reiterate that, the longer we open, it doesn't mean that you're going to find the one. I think the process and the timeline that we have, if we stick to it, I think you'll be happy with the end result.
Yeah, and like I say, I have found that in my experience that shortening it too much, I always seem to find candidates that didn't hear about it. I've never had that trouble when I've had it open for 2 months, but I have when I've shortened it, say, to 4 or 5 weeks. So I would stick with a timeline. You're right in the middle of the lists of districts that are filling the position. Going longer than 2 months, I don't think you're going to find more candidates out there by doing that. So I think your timing is good.
All right, thank you. Ms. Davis, do you have any concerns about the process or the timeline that you've heard that you'd like to speak on?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
All righty.
Okay. One of the things.
Hold on. Could you hold on just a second? Ms. Creel, you have a question?
Yeah.
Thank you, President Solis. I have a couple of requests. So are we going to, once we provide feedback, in addition to our discussion here today, can the board get a list of the identified stakeholder individuals and groups that you're going to be meeting with so that we're all on the same
Sure.
page. And I'm also, just very briefly, 30 seconds or less, pros and cons in just sending this survey to our entire central community. I mean, it's a written document. We have access and ability with technology. Other than creating significant work, any other disadvantages in just sending it out to get everybody's feedback for response?
That's a great question. And if I may, we are really in favor of you giving it the widest distribution that you can manage. And it's all, electronic. So the input comes back electronically, unless you want somebody to do it in their own writing, and then we have somebody enter it electronically, which I have done in other places. So what normally happens in districts is that the district accesses its networks of emails and sends out usually 2 or 3 notices about sort of an invitation to respond to the survey. And then, then you get your response typically that way. But I have had also districts, make sure that they do word of mouth. We do word of mouth, and in every one of our meetings where we meet with people, we say, spread the word, because we think it's, word of mouth is effective. Certainly sending out, rafts of emails to different groups, especially parents, gets some response. So it's really whatever the district can manage to solicit response, we're in favor of.
Will our local religious organizations within the central community receive a questionnaire?
Certainly can from us. Yeah. I mean, there's, any way we can access other web groups is we're in favor of.
In the chat, there's a question about stakeholders adding key nonprofits, religious institutions. Absolutely. Again, you're in charge of this process. You tell us who you want us to meet with, and we'll definitely meet with them.
Yeah, we've met with religious leaders in other searches. There are some districts that say we'd really like to have you get the opinion of our churches and our synagogues and our mosques. Anything you want us to do in that regard, we're wide open on it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chan?
Thank you so much, Dr. Hewitt and Dr. Monroe, for addressing the question in the chat. But I guess maybe even for staff, if we could possibly begin, even just put a list of, I'm just thinking like key nonprofits we engage with, whether that be, I'm thinking of the Highway City group at the Granville station across the street from, of course, groups that are centered there that work with a lot of our families, Central La Familia. And then, of course, our religious institutions. I'm thinking I know we have at least 2, one Laotian temple and one, actually both are Laotian temples in our districts, Buddhist temples, obviously gurdwaras, obviously churches and whatnot. And I can also help in terms of just engaging us with certain nonprofits that work a lot with Central Unified.
Wonderful. Excellent. Good.
President Solis, I have one last comment.
Go ahead, man.
On the matter of the advertising period, I've heard what Dr. Monroe and Mr. Hewitt have said. I'm going to push back a little because I think there is something to be said if we provide, we have no guarantees as to whether we extend those 30 days online advertising, whether we'd get the candidate we're looking for. And I've heard from Trustee Cervantes and to his points. So what about just extending it 45 days? It's still within the 2-month timeline that we're looking to solicit stakeholder input and our board meeting, our special board meeting. And I would specifically request that we do that if there's consensus from the board. If we're going to be making any changes or updates to the posting, because statistically speaking, there are many candidates, particularly marginalized communities or females, who will look at job postings, and if they don't feel that they match 100% of the requirements or the description, they're not going to apply. So any change, and I'm just using that as an example, I'm not saying anything to one particular gender or sex. I think it would be in our best interest to at least allow at a minimum 45 days, if not the 60 days, if there is general consensus from our board.
One thing I just want to add, and we can discuss it together as well, and I appreciate that. I think that the July 1 date to July 1st date, if in terms of a start date for a superintendent, that's where you would probably get more flexibility out of by saying, okay, well, that might be negotiable. But in terms of the application timeline, you also have to take into account families and just getting situated and completing their time and giving them that flexibility in terms of the start date, as opposed, because if we're going to advertise it as July 1 start date, that's where you could run into some issues given our timeline currently. And again, we're flexible. We'll do what you want. And I hear you, and we'll definitely do it. But the flexibility on the start date might be something that would garner that interest. But that, I'm just looking at the time where families have to get situated, get moved, housing, get everything together. You want to definitely help them in that process by saying, okay, here's our deadline. That helps them to know, okay, here's what I need to do. Here's what needs to be done. That's also part of it. So that's just something to think about as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I guess, and maybe somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but between January 31st, 2022, when it's scheduled to be posted, and the April 5th, 2022 date, we have 45 days, right? So I'm not proposing we change any other deadlines unless any other board members are.
Right.
And I apologize for the simplicity, but I just want that I have no issue with that.
Yeah, and I think I would do more than 30 days of online. Let me see if they do. I think they have a varied cost. I don't know if they split it by 30-day increments or 15-day increments, but I'll look into that and let you know. It's not very expensive, the online. The printed is, but the online is a lot less expensive. So I think it's probably a good idea to, to have it parallel with the amount of time it's open.
Does the board want more time? I mean, would everyone want additional?
I think what I'm hearing, Stanley, is that everybody is comfortable with the 60-day, the 2-month open period, and that the closing date is a good one. But the one point of contention is, do we want to have it advertised? See, we're advertising in EdCal for 2 months. The 4 postings are sequenced 2 weeks apart. So that covers the 2-month period. But the 30 days is only half of that. So we ought to get them to align. So I'll see what the cost is. Just keep the online posted for the 2 months. I don't think it's a big deal.
Sorry,
Jack,
I misunderstood. My apologies.
President Solis, did you ask?
Yeah, you had your hand up.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I wanted to clarify my comment. I don't think 30 days is enough. At minimum, I was suggesting a 2-month advertisement process. No less would be my suggestion.
Yeah. And we've got 2 months in EdCal with the 4 postings.
Thank you.
But let's line up the online for the 60 days as well. I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and there was a discussion about the July 1st date. Something about flexibility. I think Stanley, you said that. Define what you mean by flexibility.
No, well, I think we clarified it. I just wanted to know from the board, was there an issue with the timeline that we currently have where we have the cutoff for applicants? But now that it's just strictly the advertising and advertising only, then that's not a problem. I mean, again, we'll do what the board wants. And if we have a cutoff date and then we have a start date of July 1, then that's great. If we were extending the application, then I would say, let's look at, the start date as well. But that's not an issue. It's just strictly the advertising. We just want more of that. And we're fine with the cutoff of the application deadline, then that's great. We're good. But again, everything is through the board and we just want to hear from you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Okay. I think now we're ready to get into the criteria. And I'd like to, if you're ready for that, I would like for you to do a little exercise for me. Have all of you read through the criteria examples that I sent to you? Getting a lot of head nodding. Yep. So as you look at those, you notice that they all start with, a short phrase that kind of captures what the paragraph is. For instance, a visionary leader here with Bellflower. The next one is a instructional leader. The next one is a communicator. And we consistently do that. I like to make them bold so they really stand out. A fiscal manager is that next one. And these are the areas that a collaborator is there. Bellflower was one that was kind of centered on what most districts would do. So what I do with boards in this, and I really enjoy this exercise, is we go from the big to the more specific when we're looking at your criteria. So I would like to give you about whatever time you need, about 10 or 15 minutes to go ahead, and you've read through these, to write down the 5 or 6 big areas that you're looking at. And before you do that, I want to give you more examples of them. And I'll talk to you in general a little bit about them, and then we'll go through some of these and have you take a look at them. So in most districts, people are looking for a leader who is a good communicator. They're also looking for a leader who is a very strong educator, is a good teaching, and I call them teaching and learning superintendent. So you also would see it as an instructional leader. In almost all districts, they want a superintendent who's a good manager, who can manage the budget, who can manage the HR functions. Not that they do it, but that they have a team that does it and they're knowledgeable about that. And in almost all districts, people not only want a good communicator, but they want somebody who is a collaborator. Now, this is where this takes different turns. Sometimes people want somebody who is, very, very good at building teams of people rather than having to do everything themselves. Sometimes they want somebody who is a real great community builder, is out there in the community and building these teams, and is somebody who is very approachable by the community and is very engaged with the community. Sometimes boards will want somebody who is what we call an equity leader, that the core of the work that they do centers around equity work in education, making sure that we're providing the services and the resources for all groups of students, no matter what their needs are, that we give everybody an equitable amount of resources to reach their highest potential. So as you read through these, take a look at them, and I would like each of you to have some quiet time and to write down 5 or 6 broad areas. Now, I'm not looking for somebody who's just a very specific thing like a good listener or somebody who is good with budgets. I'm looking at these bigger topics that you can see, and I think the first example is a good one. Let's scroll down. Let's go past Calexico. I want to do one that I did here. Fast forward past that one. Some of them you can see are shorter. I like the longer ones. Yeah, this is a good one. Golden Valley, an experienced educator. Here's the one with teaching and learning. You can see all of the things that come under it. An ethical leader with high moral character. That's one I missed. That some people want somebody who's this oftentimes comes up in a district where there has been some issue with honesty or with use of funds and things like that. Sometimes that you're looking and saying, God, we really need a leader that's of strong moral character. The next one here, strong management skills, and this is again with the budget. And then here's one. The reason I like this next one is oftentimes you'll see this creativity and innovation. Okay, they had a whole bullet there where it said we need somebody that's really going to push us outside of the box. They're going to bring in creative and innovative programs that are going to make us think outside of what we're already doing, and they're an inspiration to us. And then you can see this group also felt very strongly that they needed a community leader, somebody who's excited about being in Golden Valley and being able to connect with all of the businesses and community groups. So does that explanation and does the task help you? I want to give you sort of the rest, flesh out the rest of what I would like us to do tonight. Now, after you do that, we'll have Anita go ahead and put those together. We'll have you each report out, and we'll see where some of the similarities are and where we are, and we'll talk about what are the big areas that you really want. Once we establish that, then we'll talk about each one of them. And I'll just give you the time to be able to give me the important characteristics that you have in each of those areas. Now, we won't come up tonight with a finished product because I've got to hear what you have to say. And then I will go ahead and craft what you've told me about each of those areas that you've selected and send it out to you for your response. How I normally do this with districts is I'll go ahead and put that together and then send it out to you. And then you'll respond back to me and I'll make adjustments to it. And we use that as the preliminary criteria. And then when we report back to you at the second meeting with the stakeholder input, we go ahead and re-examine the criteria and say, okay, now that we have also heard from our stakeholders and you've given some time to this, how do we want to modify or change or adjust the criteria that we have? So that's how I do this, and I found it to be very helpful. And boards really enjoy using this more focused criteria rather than having. Oftentimes, you'll see you have a list of 40 different things that you want your superintendent to be. It's unfocused, it's not centralized, and it doesn't really describe you. So how do you feel about using that process tonight? And then making sure that I get this. I usually get right at this because your comments and your thoughts are on my mind, and the faster that I can put things in writing and put them together and back to you, the better it is. So I anticipate that I'll probably do a write-up of this tonight and tomorrow. And I've said to Anita, I'd really like to get it in your Friday communication to you. So that you can, you can consider it over the weekend and then get back to me. We do on the final application that we put together have a criteria because each candidate has to write. This is another unique thing we do. Each candidate has to write to your criteria. They have to say how they align with the criteria and what they think about it. That's a unique thing that we do with our application. So when we finalize the application for the candidates, and that comes down the road, but it comes quickly. We want to have that criteria in there. We find the criteria is very important, but we also find it is important to listen to your stakeholders and to modify it as we go along. Okay, what do you think about this process? You ready to go, or you want to ask some questions about it?
Ms. Creel, did you have a statement? Question?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go.
Yeah.
How much time do you
Okay,
want to
how
give?
much, do you think 10 minutes is enough or do you want 15? I tell you what, let's give it 10 minutes and I'll check in with you. And if you're still reading and thinking, then that'll be fine. We'll give you more time. I want everybody to have enough time for them to write down the 5 or 6 big areas. Okay, so I got 7:25 right now, and we'll go until quarter to 8, and then I'll check in with you. Okay. Oh, and by the way, if you need to ask any questions going along, I'm here. I'm just going to get a glass of water. If any of you wondered about the background on my screen, for Thanksgiving, I took my family to all my grandchildren. And I took that picture and I thought, oh, wouldn't that be great for a screen? But it looks like I have horns coming out of my head. It's a sunset off of the Big Island. If you finish and you need a little quick break, feel free. We'll come back together in 5 minutes. Anybody have any questions or any needs to ask? Okay. All right. 5 more minutes. Anita, now would be the time I'd ask that you bring up the blank screen and you can record what each board member has for their 5 as we go along, so we can all see it together.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Okay, let's go ahead and bring up the blank screen, and then we'll have each board member, if you can get it so we can see them all together, use print that's small enough so that we can have 5 or 6 bullets for each board member on the blank screen. Yeah, that's good. There you go. You got 7 board members up there? Okay, everybody going to be done in a couple minutes? Sounds like no objections. Maybe 2 more minutes. Okay, we ready to go? Who's going to be brave and go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I took a little bit of the stuff from Golden Valley, an experienced educator with experience in teaching, administration, contract negotiation, strong communication skills, and building community consensus.
Good one. Okay, let's get them all now. Let's get all the everyone he said, because he gave us his 6. So go ahead. Say them again for Anita.
Experienced educator.
Okay.
With teaching experience and administration experience.
Yeah. Okay.
Experience in labor negotiations.
Okay. So the next one is labor negotiations. All right.
Strong communication skills.
Okay. Strong communication skills. Okay.
And ability to build community consensus.
And the community consensus. Okay.
That's it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Who wants to go next?
Ms. Creel.
My 5 areas are instructional leader.
Okay, instructional leader. Okay, let's go ahead. Instructional leader. Okay, next.
Equity leader.
Equity. Okay, all right.
Data oriented leader.
Okay.
Team builder / collaborator.
Okay, team builder, collaborator. Yep.
And then an effective listener.
Okay, all right. All right. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, get her name there. All right. Okay, who is wants to go next?
Ms. Brooks, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I guess I will. I have in the district thinking of the kids first.
Okay, so I call that one as a student-centered, right?
Okay.
Yep. Just put put kids first, student-centered. We use her language, but because I want to capture that, but student-centered, kids first.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Yep.
Great communicator.
Okay. Great communicator.
A leader of accountability.
Oh, accountability. Yeah, that's one that comes up from time to time. Accountability leader. Good.
And working with others, building a relationship.
Okay. Relationship builder. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And leading management of a school district.
Okay. Management of the district. Okay. School district. Okay. All right. Okay, that's good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, very good. All right, who's next?
I guess I'll go. Yeah, in no particular order, fiscally responsible.
Okay. Fiscally responsible.
Visionary.
Mm-hmm.
Leader. A good communicator and a good negotiator.
Okay. All right, very good.
Mr. Paul, would you like to go next?
Yeah. You read my mind. Mine are a little wordy, so I'll try to condense them down.
Okay.
How about I just read them out and then I'll help her get down the important points. Basically, I'm looking for a leader who leads by example, by work ethic, as well as understanding the environment.
Okay.
And that occurs through listening to the staff, cabinet, and through intentioned interaction with the board, individually or as a group.
Okay.
Someone who's skillful and has knowledge about effective interaction with the community. That would be community groups.
Uh-huh.
In our case, the city and the county.
Yeah.
And I say that, and I'm just going to throw this out there particularly because we've been kind of sidelined by the city for a long time.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
How many is that? I probably have more than enough.
One, two, three, four.
time
You
is
got room
up.
for one more if you want it.
One more, cool. Okay, so, and also able to identify the weaknesses in the organization and the courage to make appropriate changes.
Okay. Okay. All right, let's make sure we get the board member's name on the top of that one. Oh, I love that word substitution. I always misspell, and that's nice. It's a nice feature of that. Is that Word? You using Word or is it a Google?
She said
Word. It's
It's
Word.
Word. The newest Word, huh? Okay, I got to get my Word updated. All right.
Mr. Chan?
So I'm going to try to get rid of some that others have sort of repeated, but I'll.
Oh, it's okay to repeat at this stage.
Okay.
This is what's most important to you. Repeating is good.
Okay, so innovative, someone that's a risk taker, what I'm calling honestly humble.
Okay.
Someone boldly critical of an ethical leader. Some that have been mentioned, but I'll repeat, definitely a passionate educator, somebody community centered, somebody equity focused, and definitely fiscally astute. And just to sort of just touching on that most broadly, kind of in the way that Mr. Paul has said, making sure that you're astute to the interactions with other key state and local agencies.
Okay.
City, county, state.
Yep. We have to get all of those.
They're in the chat.
Okay. Mr. Cervantes.
Mr. Cervantes enjoys going last because I get to listen to good, well-rounded individuals like my peers. But I'm going to repeat probably several things, and it is wordy, so I want to apologize. I'd like to see somebody that's very strong with a background in education, who has a proven track record of improving the scores of underperforming districts.
Okay.
Someone who's very fiscally responsible, someone that knows how to be resourceful and utilizes resources on programs that are proven to work. Accountability, works well with all sectors of the school population and community. Somebody who's relentless and committed to setting goals and achieving their goals. Somebody who's strong but fair and has the ability to summons and reprimand when needed with good reason to improve our district.
I think the one thing that I'm going to
I was on a roll. Wait a minute. What happened? I was on a roll.
Yeah, just hang on. We're not done. I don't want to lose the goal setting. You had a statement in there about setting goals, right?
Yes, I did. Let me go back.
Can you repeat that for Anita?
Absolutely. Let me get back.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Yep.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm looking here at my.
I think it was can set
Man,
goals.
how much should I? Wait a minute. Hang on.
Yep. Okay.
Oh, goal setter. Here we go. Relentless, committed, someone who can set and achieves goals.
Yeah.
Okay, have him repeat that again.
The whole thing.
I'm sorry, I can't hear. Keep going.
She'd like you to repeat the goal parts.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think it was relentlessly committed to setting goals, wasn't it?
Well, close.
Close.
Hang on, I've got this
Achieving
on.
goals.
someone, proven track record, sorry, hang on.
Oh, yeah.
Programs, proven ability to work, school, relentless, committed to setting goals and achieving goals.
Okay, good. I want to make sure to get that. Good.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah, if you got more.
I do. Strong, but fair.
Strong but fair. Okay.
With the ability to summons or reprimand when needed for good, fair reason for the betterment of our district.
Okay. There you go. Yeah, she got most of that.
Or for the improvement of our district.
Mr. Cervantes, can you
Yes.
repeat after when you said with fair?
Hang on, let me go back. I'm trying to do, I can't do two things at once, so I apologize. So I'm trying to get there now. Oh my goodness. I did this on my phone and I think I just lost it.
I think we got it though. Works with all sectors of the community. Strong but fair, has the ability to reprimand when needed. And I think you said for the good of all students.
For the good of the students and the district.
There you go. For the good of the student and the
I did
district.
use the word summons because sometimes you have to summon somebody to accountability.
Uh-huh.
And it was just a term that I thought sounded kind of cliche.
Okay.
No one is laughing but me, so I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Great list. Now, Anita, can you get those so we can see them at one time? Like maybe reduce some of the spaces between the board members' names, and then we can get it on one page, or you all have magic. There you go. Because what I'd like to do is to have everybody now talk about these, and where now the next task is for us to see where do we find the commonalities amongst us. Because this is the criteria from the entire board. There's a lot of overlap. Like one thing I noticed is that you all really do want somebody with good collaborative communication skills, right? I mean, I see that in the first two right there, and then sort of in the third one with the relationship builder. A good communicator in number 4. Number 5 has, let's see, I thought almost everybody had this in theirs. Don't see it in number 5 right away. Number 6 is interaction with key agencies, and Mr. Cervantes had strong background education. So with all sectors of the community. So it seems like one of the common areas is communication and collaboration, which is very typical of boards. They want a person who communicates well. Would you all agree that that's in at least the majority of people's responses?
In no particular order?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, what else do you find in this list is common amongst you, or at least with 3 or 4 of you?
The educational background.
Yeah, right.
Instructional leader.
Instructional leader, huh? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right, I think we got 2. All right, what else? What about accountability? Man, that really came out strong with you guys, huh? Several of you were looking for somebody who knows accountability and will hold the district to accountability. How is accountability in your school district? As a board, that's one of your main functions is accountability. You have the responsibility, according CSBA comes up with these I think the 5 different responsibilities of a board. And one big one is accountability. I've learned a lot about during my tenure as a superintendent that I really need to make sure that the board was the one that got all the data and information and reviewed how we were doing on every aspect of the school district. So how does that work for you guys? Is accountability an issue for you, or is it a strength and you want it to continue to be? I'm kind of curious.
If I
Mrs.
may,
Brooks?
President Solis?
Yeah.
Pardon, I didn't hear you, Mr. Korea.
Oh, I said if I may, President Solis?
Sure, go ahead.
I mean, I would say for me personally, I believe there's an issue, but I also see accountability from the perspective of student success by a majority of our students. So I would be interested in hearing, which then impacts every educator in our organizational level. But I'd be curious from my fellow trustees whether when they're talking about accountability, if they also mean based on student success and growth and improvement, or whether we're talking about personnel.
Yeah.
When I think of accountability, number one, I go back to our primary mission. And as far as I'm concerned, the primary mission of this school district is to educate our children. Okay, so that's number one. Yes, that's a part of it. We have been focusing as a board on improving our academic performance of our children or students here. I think that's why that was brought up. The other part about responsibility of staff, to me, that goes back to the old argument of what came first, the chicken or the egg. In other words, who's running the school district, the school board, or the administrator?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at this accountability, and I see it as a strong component of at least three of you. Mrs. Cervantes had started with that. And then where was the other one that I saw? Ms. Brooks, you said a leader of accountability. You had it very strong there. And then it was a recurring theme that came forward. Okay, so I've got three different areas right now: instructional leader, a collaborator, communicator, accountability leader, and many of you touched on the management function, fiscally responsible. One of you had, there it is again, fiscally responsible with Mr. Cervantes. And a couple of you had that, and somebody else had labor negotiations came up a couple of times. So oftentimes the management end of things has to do with personnel and fiscal and facilities, those three areas. Is that at one of the big areas, or is it so important with one or the other that they should stand out by themselves? Let's talk about fiscally responsible and HR sort of things. Is this a single area where we describe them within that paragraph, or did they stand out by themselves?
I mean, I would say that they are one and the same, that it's just more of a general. And I would be more concerned with using that type of description would limit our candidates in that they would have to have, now we're looking at potentially individuals with experience as superintendents or assistant superintendents, where I'm not sure that I'm not comfortable limiting it to just those type of background positions.
Yeah.
But I'm one voice. I don't know how everyone else.
Well, when we put this as a criteria, there's a certain, it doesn't mean that they were a CBO or they were an HR person. It means that they've had, experiences in that area and know what it means to run a district through the staff of HR and through the staff of the business office. So, but it does take a certain, ability and expertise. So I think that is one of your areas, because I see it in it when we look at the traditional labor, money, management sort of thing. Almost all of you had touched upon that in some way, and I like the way that you had different different dimensions of it. Okay. All right. So that's a fourth one. Now, I think that there's some very many of you talked about both strong ethics, strong work habits, and then many of you talked also about being honest and humble, bold. These are a lot of kind of characteristics that we're looking at. Is there a consensus that you're looking for a person with strong personal ethics in this job? That's something that is a big criteria for you all?
It would be for me. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we talk about that, Trustee Paul,
Sure.
if I may?
Yep.
Can you articulate what you mean by that? Like, what are we?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So in looking at one of the questions we asked, what are the skills, attributes, and characteristics that you're looking for in a superintendent? That's one of the 4 questions. And now, obviously, the skills we've talked a lot. A skill is knowing fiscal management. A skill is being a good teaching and learning. But the characteristics one comes up a lot of times with boards, that it's really important that they have a strong ethical leader. And by that, they mean somebody who can be trusted, somebody who is honest, somebody who has a strong work ethic, has a set of core values that you see in successful leaders, and that is something that they really are focused on making sure that they get in a superintendent. Now, not all boards do that, but some as you look through the examples, right? Some of them had a strong ethical leader. That's what they're talking about. So my question is that something that this board is looking for? Of course, we want every leader to have those attributes, but some of them are strong. Some people are stronger in that regard than others. Not to brag, but one thing I know, one job that I got, I had a reputation about being very open and honest, maybe to a fault. But the board was looking for that. They really needed somebody who people could trust and who was honest to a fault. And so that's part of the reason why I got the job, is that was what they were looking for. And so does that help in this regard about, should this one be one of the central themes about a person's characteristics and ethics?
Mr. Paul, I think they were asking you, could you elaborate on what you meant about a strong leader? Can you expand that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you can research whatever you feel like on leadership, but there are a lot of components to leadership. I said a work ethic is what I said. It got wrote down as ethic. Oh, no, there it is, work ethic.
Yeah, so
that's what I meant by that. A strong work ethic isn't someone who works themselves to the bone. It's someone who understands the task at hand and matches the effort to that task. And a good leader, in my opinion, will anticipate issues and do the homework up front and be ready for what will likely come at that person. At the same time, that kind of a leader, I mean, we've all been around people that are strong leaders. You look at them and almost know immediately that they're a strong leader, because you look at them and you know you know that that they're on the ball, that they have put in the work, they've identified effectively the environment in which they're operating, they understand it completely, they're willing to take input from those who either report to them or they report to. And there's just a lot of things to it. And I think that all spells ethic.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well said. Very well said.
Thank you.
I think it'd be helpful. I sort of hear what you're saying is they're able to identify and gain consensus on goals and objectives, and then give us a pathway to achieve those objectives.
Yeah, and I think that that's why I was asking to hear from members of the board what they identify as ethical leader and work ethic, because I think, I mean, we have very limited space as to what we're going to describe and identify, and I want to make sure that we all have the same understanding. I don't disagree. I think these are all qualifications that I would want in a leader, but I almost, and maybe I'm just naive, it's almost a sense of, I mean, they have to, if they're going to be applying for these positions, that's almost like a given. I mean, I understand that we're identifying it, so I just want to make sure that as we describe in more detail what we mean, that it's consistent with the perception of this board and what we're expecting those candidates to write about. So thank you, Trustee Paul and Trustee Solis.
Mm-hmm. You know what Trustee Paul described is not prevalent in every type of leader, actually. And I've done a lot of study in leadership, and there's a lot of charismatic leaders that actually don't have the strong work ethic that he described. They lead by their personality and by their relational work, rather than, and then their staff has to do the type of thing that he has talked about. So this is an important conversation: is where are we on what we're looking for in our leader? And it doesn't surprise me that this comes up from your school district, because this oftentimes comes up in school districts that are Central Valley, and that it kind of reflects the culture that you are in. Your culture is one of a strong work ethic and of clear goals and clear directions and moving forward. And you have a lot of great examples of that in the Fresno area of districts that have been outstanding because they've had a management system and a culture in their district that has embraced it. So I'm going on a little bit too much because I kind of embrace this myself. But when you think about Sanger, and when you think about a couple of other great school districts that have been used as examples up and down the state, it oftentimes comes back to this one, doesn't it? Okay. So I have right now a strong instructional leader, a communicator, collaborator, a person who is engaged and understands accountability, both in the areas, but primarily centered around student growth. Okay, and that includes data and teaching and learning skills. Kind of ties a little bit with the first one. One who is strong in management with both fiscal and labor relations and all the things that is, and then another one that is this personal strong ethics, including work ethics and and is an ethical leader. Those are 5 really good areas to describe your superintendent, but there's more in here. And so some of them may not come up as strong for all of you, but some of them may, but there may be a 6th one. So a couple of the things that I also see that not everybody did talk about is this idea of a person who is going to push the limits, is a risk taker, is innovative, and is sort of this visionary leader that says, here's the direction to go, and I want you to consider something that you haven't done before. Is that a characteristic that you're looking for in your superintendent? Or is it, and sometimes these are just opposed to each other. So for instance, that may or may not be in line with somebody who is strong with accountability and wants to first take a look at what's working and what isn't working. Tell me more about, who was it that talked about the risk taking? I think it was Mr. Chan. Yeah. Tell me more about what you were thinking about in that one. Because I have seen some boards say this is really important to us. Elk Grove was one of those. Elk Grove said we've always been an innovative district. Oh, and New Haven was too. New Haven, both of those districts are well known within the state for leadership in new programs and effective practices that nobody had been doing before. So they prided themselves on hiring superintendents that were very global and saw a lot of opportunities out there and would bring them to the school district. Tell me, Mr. Chan, tell me more about what you're thinking about. Then I want to hear from the rest of the board about, is this something that is primary, or is this something we like but is not a major focus?
So the two school districts you named are two that I also work in, and or in terms of my other job, and
right,
two that I'm very familiar with. And so specifically that I wasn't thinking so much particularly with New Haven. They've had a lot of change, but yeah, with Elk Grove, in terms of when we were interviewing Mr. Paul and Mr. Solis and I, and we asked for even critical feedback of in terms of some of the other agencies that were being interviewed, what is their perception of our district? They said, you all are probably a district many would like to be in, if for no other reason is that you guys are very underperforming from where you could be. And so when I talk about risk taker, in terms of what I mean is somebody that sees that which communities overall, where do we have huge areas for improvement? One that is willing to say, yes, this is my responsibility. Hold me accountable. Let me be so bold as to experiment in different areas, and also take the onus. Like in terms of if we're not making results, let me be able to share that with you. If we're seeing progress at certain schools and not others, maybe I'll share that with you. But one that is looking at the larger landscape, willing to take risks, and also be able to be held accountable for those as well.
Well said. Yep. Yeah, and so let me hear from the rest of the board on this issue. Is this part of instructional leadership, or is it something that you think is of the importance that it should stand out?
Ms. Creo?
I mean, I consider that as part of instructional leadership, but I do think that it's something so important, and this board continuously has been talking about this and the need to identify areas and subgroups within our student population that need dedicated support and may need more financial assistance. And so I agree with what Trustee Singh just shared, in that they have to be willing to identify that and take the necessary action, even if it's not going to be the most popular thing to do amongst the community or amongst our district. So I think, to me personally, it's something that is so important that needs to be its own section, although it is a component of being, in my perspective, an educational instructional leader.
Okay. All right. Others?
I concur.
Okay. All right. Other points of view? Anybody else?
I think there's consensus within the board that one of our focus has to be improving our academic performances.
Yeah.
But I also believe there's more than one roadway to get us there. So I'm willing to leave it up to a superintendent to choose his pathway there, because the end result is when we're looking at his performance or their performance, he's going to have to choose his own path as long as we get to the destination that the board has set.
Yeah.
President Solis, but does that mean that we should, one of our criteria is that they have experience, that these candidates or the candidate that we select has experience with working in environments where we have marginalized communities or where we have such low performance and a need to decide how that's done? Because if you've never had experience in working in that environment, I mean, I'm not interested in them as candidates.
I think it would depend on your focus on how valuable do you value the experienced educator, because that experienced educator, the person that sat in the classroom, has done education, is paying attention to the different types of approaches. That is what we're basically going to be looking for, as well as part of the job are the administrative duties.
Taking notes. I'm taking notes on all of these. I think that you're giving me lots of information on instructional leadership and then also the accountability phrase. And I think that these two parts of the criteria are essential to the board. As you talk, you're talking about working with marginalized communities. You're talking about finding methodologies and programs in order to make instructional gains with students, and that's critical in your next leader. It's good to know that. I wanted to touch on a couple of other things that I saw in here, but not across everything, and they either go in with what we have right now or they could stand out. Many districts talk about equity as a centerpiece of what they want in their superintendent. There are superintendents that are very strong in equity, and they see all of the work that they do through an equity lens. And then there are superintendents that understand equity and that it is through accountability it is achieved. So I'm curious about how important this is as a criteria for the board, and it's a critical question that comes up in many districts these days, is how do you want me to represent this equity leader that I think Mrs. Carrillo mentioned. But many of you mentioned
I think
about
the equity is an important part because that's going to dictate the individual approach. So you're going to have equity in the approach that you deal with our students. You're going to have equity in the approach that you deal with our parents. You're going to have equity in your approach on your hiring and your HR practices.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right. Others? What are other responses to the issue about how we represent an equity leader in this criteria?
I mean, for me, it's huge, and you have to, in my personal perspective, you have to have an equity lens. Mm-hmm. Acknowledging and recognizing and knowing what equity means is very different than taking an active role and analyzing and identifying that as an instructional leader or an accountable leader. How are we ensuring then that equity is part of that and that it's not just a word that we're constantly throwing out? So, I mean, for me, it's very important, but I'm one voice, so.
For you, would you have this as a centerpiece of one of the criteria you were looking for? If it was on your list, if it was,
Yes.
it was right up there on your list, you know?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Are there others on the board that feel the same way?
Yes.
Okay.
Me as well. I mean, I think we, for instance, on one of our recent board meetings, our interim superintendent, provided information and data, and although we have lots of room for improvement for all of our students, we are definitely failing more certain student subsets even more, and so like to be able to name that, to be able to center that, to be able to allocate resources to that. For me, that's a really important and strong piece that is, with that sort of being bold as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. That's very helpful. Okay. So is there more that you've given me a lot to consider and a lot to work on a first draft of your criteria. And I have a good sense about what you are looking for in a superintendent. Is there anything that you want to talk more about in these? I've actually got 7 areas right now, and I'm gonna work on what you told me, the importance of each, and give you a first draft to look at by Friday. Is there more that you want to tell me about communication and about collaboration? Is there anything more that you want to talk to me about? What else do I need some more information on? Anything more you want to talk to me about the management of the school district? I would like to know more about both of those areas that you said stand out. Let's start with communication and collaboration. Somebody mentioned that the city doesn't pay an awful lot of attention to you. Is it important for you to have somebody who's very strong with community relations, who can get out there and is highly approachable, and people are going to say, oh, that's the leader of that school district? And there are some leaders that have a bigger presence than others. Tell me about what you mean when you're looking at a collaborator and a communicator, both inside and outside of the district.
I made that comment, and so I'll start it off, and then if that's okay, Mr. Solis.
Sure.
I think the position has become better in the last couple of years, in part because we have one of the council members has really tried to focus on this side of town, and that's been great. And we've seen a lot of inroads, but I think it will continue to require someone to be basically knocking on their door constantly, involving directly, in our case, the mayor and those city council folks whose areas cross over into our district, as well as the county. The county seems like we don't get a lot of input from our county leaders. Really surprising, because that's most of our district area-wise. So that's just my perception, and I think it really takes someone to have an understanding of that, of how that works, of how government works and functions, especially as it relates to the school district. And also has the network, or is willing to create the network to be able to be effective there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just one quick thing, just as a follow-up. We heard council member, mayor. Is there any specific person that you would want us to, again, when we talk about stakeholders, reach out to as part of that process that would start to help to bridge that divide? Or so we show them that, their integral process in selecting the next superintendent and letting their voice be heard as well?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that would start with the council members.
Okay.
Whose areas, intersect our district, and then the one county supervisor, as well as the mayor. I'd feel comfortable with you doing that. And frankly, I would include the chief of police and the sheriff.
Okay.
Mhm. Good. Yep. Anybody else on communicator and collaborator, either inside or outside of the district? I'm getting a good sense for what's needed in your community.
I was just going to add to Mr. Paul's point, also in terms of our interface, especially with Assembly and Senate members as well, and California legislators, since so much of our funding is dependent on. And I think I was reading a report that NADA, for instance, in the Assembly, the Central Valley, or the San Joaquin Valley to be specific, does not have a single member of the Assembly that's part of the education sort of subcommittee. So oftentimes, particular to our points, they're rarely heard. Just a little bit adding to Mr. Paul's point, Central Unified is represented currently by 3 different city council members, and until one, I would say, took a little bit more of a focus on the district, we were far too often, just sort of not really paid that much attention to. And as a growing district that is in need of streets, crosswalks, lights, some of that's by the county, depending on the location, some of that's by the city. But I mean, more often than not, when I get complaints from parents, oftentimes it's around these sort of even civic infrastructure that obviously is tailing our growth in our schools and other specific priority needs. And I think that's our interface to Mr. Paul's point is really, really crucial.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's helpful. Yeah.
But
Mr. Cervantes?
thank you, Board Chair. But that communication and that ability to communicate resonates throughout our district, not inside of our district, as well as on the outside. But it is equally as important that person is a skilled communicator within their management teams, within their employees, within their staff, whether classified or certificated. With that being said, I obviously if that person has those good communication skills, they will carry on into the school district as well, and their ability to lead the school district through good, clear communication.
And with the board, right?
With the board.
And with you all as well. Uh-huh. Yep. Okay. All right. Good. That's helpful. All right. I have a barking dog in the background. Can you all hear him? Anybody else on communication skills and collaborations? Okay, that's good.
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah, you bet.
I think it's been said, and I don't mean to overdo this one, but as far as communication skills, listening is a major part of that. Effective listening.
Yep. Please tell me what you see as effectively listening. What does that mean to you?
Well, initially it means just shutting up and listening and being focused. An effective listener asks questions, tries to delve into the things that were brought up, and is considerate of other people, even if they don't agree with their opinions or input.
Yes.
I agree 100% with Trustee Paul, and that's exactly why for me it was not just being an effective communicator, but being an effective listener and being willing to hear criticism and reaching out to within our district and outside of our district to improve specifically our student academics. But I think it's very important that it's not a constant approach of being on the defense or trying to just push things down people's throat versus listening to the perspectives and understanding the diversity that exists among our students and amongst our staff and our community.
Okay. So that's of importance. Okay. All right. Okay. Is there anything else that you all would like to give to me or to add to this discussion tonight to help me put together your criteria, your first draft of your criteria? I've gotten a lot, and I feel a good sense of what you're looking for. And I will have something back to you by Friday, as I mentioned. And then I would suggest that you go ahead and communicate with me so that I can put together maybe a preliminary draft of it, and we'll communicate back and forth. And then in the if you don't think it's too late, I think in the March meeting we'll finalize it after we see what the stakeholder responses are. How do you all feel about that plan?
So I guess that's one of my concerns is if we're not finalizing this until March, what are we posting on January 31st? I know I keep coming back and I apologize for sounding like a broken record, but I just want to make sure I'm clear in understanding what is it that we're going to be advertising to candidates.
Right. So I would put together a draft for you and then get your responses to it. And then that's what we would put out for candidates.
Thank you.
Now, would that be a combination of the items that we spoke about on this list, as well as our current job description for the position?
It would not be your job description. It would be what we've talked about on this list. But certainly you can supply me with a job description, or we can also make it accessible to the candidates.
Either or. I don't think it should be only the job description. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that information needs to be provided to the candidates. Now,
we'll do
how
that.
it's provided to them, I'm not exactly sure. Ms. Creo?
President Solis, I think, and I don't know if any of the other board members have an opinion, but I have a particular opinion about this matter. The job description, I believe, needs to come back to the board for discussion and review. I mean, for me, of significance, we don't really talk about student success in any, I mean, there's a mention, and I think that to me is very important for our superintendent, and it's what this board has continuously talked about. So I think this should come back at least to discuss and maybe revise at our next board meeting, or when we can, so it can get posted and it can be accessed. But I think that needs to happen, or I would request that happens.
Okay.
That's strongly represented in the items that we just gave them from each board member. I'm not saying that we would delete the information we did tonight. I'm just saying that we would add it to the current job description. I'm just worried about the time frame. Are we going to be able to redo the job description and meet the time frame of putting the information out? Since I'm not saying don't put in the stuff that we did today.
Yeah, I didn't think you were. I was just saying I would like for it to come back to the board for discussion. Maybe I'm the only one that would like to see revisions, and at which point no revisions would be made.
Mr. Cervantes?
No, Madam, I'm sorry. Board Member Carrillo is not the only one. I too would like to see it come back for a final tweak and or approval.
All right, we'll place it on the agenda then.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
Now, we have one more task before I let you go tonight, and I want to tell you my appreciation for you being so attentive for the last 2.5 hours. There's also always requirements for the job. It's kind of interesting. These are the criteria, but there are requirements for jobs. And in California is one of the very few states that actually does not have any legal requirements for the job. Isn't that interesting? You do not have to have an administrative credential to be a superintendent. You actually don't have to be an educator to be a superintendent in California. So the state of California has no requirements to be a superintendent. However, every board I've talked to says, well, gosh, we think the person should have been a teacher, or they should have been a principal, or both, or they should have a master's degree, or they ought to have a doctorate degree. So I want to take you through the 4 areas of typical requirements, and then I would entertain anything else. But I also want to mention to you that the more requirements that you have, the fewer candidates will be able to apply if you require a requirement. That sounds kind of funny, but sometimes we want to prefer something, sometimes it's required. And so let me give you the easy example to start with. Some districts really want to make sure that their candidates all have doctorate degrees. Not many do that at this point, but some do. So my first question to the board is, do you have a preference or a requirement for any advanced degrees? Let me give you the options of what is out there. You could say, well, we require a master's degree, or we would prefer a master's degree, or you could say we prefer a doctor's degree, or you could say we require a doctor's degree. Now, clearly, if you required a doctor's degree, I've already mentioned tonight, I am not a doctor. I could never apply for your superintendency. And but many districts think it's important that some advancement in their education has occurred, their own personal education, in order to be the educational leader. So let's start with that one. Do you have any requirement or preferences for advanced degrees, whether it be master's or doctorate?
Jack, do you have any items that you would like to suggest that we have as a requirement?
I think to keep the pool as vast and inclusive as possible, I recommend that the word preferable or preference for those higher degrees is critical.
Okay. Any other items that we need to spell out?
Oh yeah. So we.
If I may interrupt.
Hold on. That question was to Jack.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I'm just listening to the feedback. If the wishes of the board is to have somebody with an educational background, with classroom and teaching experience and administrative experience, I think it's critical that those 2 advanced degrees are fixed as requirements in the job posting or job description.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Creel?
Our job description identifies education and experience requirements and preferences, as well as license and other requirements, which was approved by the board April 24th, 2018. So if we're looking for something other than what's listed, or would like to make changes, then I believe, and staff or President Solis may correct me, we would need to amend this job description.
What does it say?
For education and experience, it says district level experience as superintendent, assistant superintendent, associate superintendent, or deputy superintendent experience required, teaching experience preferred, site level administrative experience preferred, master's degree preferred, doctorate preferred, as licenses and other requirements, California administrative credential or certificate in the field of education leadership required, and a valid California driver's license.
Does the board want to hold on to those preferences and requirements? They are, pretty reasonable and pretty typical. But we do list those in the brochure and the advertisement that we put together.
Do we want a California license if we're advertising elsewhere too?
We could say, or the equivalent.
Well, they have, I mean, it says that part of their job duties and environment, they can drive a vehicle to conduct work. So I think, I mean, and California has specific rules. Once you move here, you'd have to get a driver's license. So I'm not sure. I guess this is why I think we need to discuss the job description, because I also don't think a doctorate preferred, we're going to limit our pool.
Not if you prefer it. If you require it, you will. If you prefer it, you will not.
Well, that's the debate. I mean, there are conversations about whether simply adding that on there would deter candidates. But again, that's debatable, and I'm sure there are statistics with respect to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When we say preferred, candidates will ask me, I don't have a doctorate. Is that going to be a problem? And I say it's preferred, but they have not said it's required, so you should apply. That's what a recruiter sees that is, and that's how we would communicate with them.
Jack, you look like you're chomping at the bit to put something in. Go ahead.
I concur with Mr. Hewitt, but I also agree with Trustee Carrillo too. When we brought this job description to the board in 2018, we had a really hearty discussion with the school board at the time on these very topics, and we landed on required in some areas and preferred in others. I think preferred is the can I say the industry standard when we see such postings, but eliminating them from this thing, I don't think will hurt the pool for candidates to apply. Requiring them will. That's my
right.
My input.
Right. Yeah, I agree entirely.
But also to Trustee Carrillo's point, I think a critical part of this process is for the current board to review the current job description, and if we need to update it, and I think the board should and update it because it will reflect the scope of the job for the new superintendent because this is a viable document, as you know, and it will be can be referenced along the way, whether there's a need for discussion regarding a medical issue or just the board to use as a reference to make sure that it is a scope of the work of the superintendent. So that's my input. I think it's important that it is reviewed on a regular basis, especially for a position like this one. And the term preferred, again, industry standard. Without it, I think we make do. The word requirement will limit for sure.
I want to make a suggestion on this because this is critical. This is the criteria is very important, but this is critical to people applying. So I don't think that this can really sit and wait for very long. I think, if I remember right, you had reserved some time on your next board meeting for setting up the criteria and the requirements. Am I right about that? I know it's all the business meetings are very busy, but if you could find a way to come to agreement on just this part of the job description, what the requirements are, the education and experience requirement and the licenses, that would be very helpful and beneficial. So I would recommend, if you do have time on your next board meeting that you set aside, that you at least take these two areas and finalize them for us. Because otherwise, it's going to be a bit difficult to get out there and advertise.
Ms. Davis?
Yes,
Do we have time to add an item on to the next agenda?
we can, you bet.
Can you please add that on?
I will.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right, very good, very good.
One request, President Solis, that it goes before the board as an action item. So if there are any revisions, we can discuss it and do it then.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
And I would like to give you just some things to consider as you talk about these, especially in the licenses and other requirements. You seldom see a driver's license on the list, and that's up to you. And I understand the need to be able to drive. So whatever you decide on that is fine. But that's not usually something we see on the that we see. What we often see is a California administrative credential very frequently. I want to mention that then you do not want a non-traditional candidate. We do have candidates who come forward who do not have administrative credentials. Not many of them, but I've had a couple that have come forward over time. And there are some examples in California where we've had either attorneys or people coming out of the military and high level military positions and such that do not have an administrative credential. I'm not a proponent of that, honestly, but I just want to bring that to your attention that those candidates we would have to just say, you really can't apply. So that those are rare, and I'm not so sure they're highly successful. I think all of the other ones are fine because you have them preferred. You do have district level experience required, and I think that's a good idea because of the size of your district and the expertise that it takes. So you are saying that you want somebody who has had superintendent in their name or has been a superintendent in their position name, or has been a superintendent to apply, and that is required. So if you had a high school principal, we oftentimes get high school principals that think that they're ready to be a superintendent. We would say no for this one, that we would say to them, we're going to have to discourage you because the board really has said they want district level experience for it. So that's just my 2 cents on what you currently have. I think you're really pretty close with what you have, but you might have some conversation and adjusting of it, and then we'll be ready to go.
Mr. Wyatt, we're coming up on 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
Any important items that you want us to discuss?
I think we've done it. I really appreciate it. It's been delightful working with you, and I'm going to get right at this tonight.
All righty. Any closing comments from any of the board members or questions, statements or questions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion by Ms. Creel. Is there a second? By Mr. Chan. Discussion on the motion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nays? The ayes have it. Thank you very much for attending the meeting.
Thank you, everybody. Looking forward to
Thank you.
seeing you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Ms.
bet.
Davis,
Bye-bye.
can you hold on,
Good night.
please?
Will do. I'm ending the YouTube stream right now, and I will be out of the meeting